It's time now for County-Wide, a special presentation of Yavapai Broadcasting News. Join Paul David and Brad Miller as they talk with our community's leaders, newsmakers, and people in the know. You'll hear about the hot topics that affect all our lives here in Yavapai County. And now, here's today's County-Wide.
Welcome to County-Wide. I'm Paul David. Good to have you in studio with us today. We're going to be talking about elk today, the Wallow Fire, and what the fire did to elk habitat. And with us in studio today is Tom Britt. He's a former Game and Fish officer with Game and Fish and Flagstaff. Is that
That's
right?
correct.
Okay. And then he's also with the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation, which we'll be talking about today as well. The Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation has their 27th annual fundraising dinner coming up on Saturday, August 6th. That's this Saturday. It's going to be at the High Country Conference Center in Flagstaff. For ticket information, 890-7414. Or go to rmef.org for more information about that, and we'll hit that again before the show is over. Tom, thanks for coming down and coming in studio today.
Thank you.
And we are wanting to talk about elk, and I want to start off first, and before the show started, you're the man for this job, that's for sure. The elk, is it native to Arizona? Because I've heard that we brought them all in, but that's not the case.
There was a native elk in Arizona, Paul. Extirpated, that is, eliminated from the state prior to the turn of the last century, prior to the turn of the 20th century, excuse me. The elk was been described as a Merriam elk, a subspecies, one of the subspecies of elk that's found in North America. And it was described on a relatively few specimens, so it's kind of cloudy as to if, in fact, it was a subspecies or not. It seemed to be most well established in terms of numbers and distribution in eastern Arizona, which would be now in the area. We're going to talk about the Wallow Fire area, Black River, White River, Mount Baldy, etc. There are two records of elk, Merriam's elk, or at least elk prior to 1900. From the area around Flagstaff. One was reported in 1872 in the Prescott Miner, when two fellows came to town, as of course Prescott at that time was a mining town, and brought two elk to town to sell for subsistence uses. And they were allegedly taken in the Bill Williams Mountain area. And then later on there was another elk or two brought in from the San Francisco Mountains, which we assume were the Peaks. 1888, Bill Munns, of course of Munns Park fame, who was a livestock operator there, did see tracks in Upper Oak Creek Canyon. Again, you know, tracks where there was it an elk, that's all speculation at this point. But anyway, they were not very common around the central part of the Mogollon Rim.
So they weren't as abundant back then as they are now.
Not,
and the elk we have now aren't the same ones that were from back then. The
elk we have now came into the state in 1913, or beginning in 1913. Okay. They came from West Yellowstone. All over the Intermountain West, elk were in very short supply because of all the subsistence hunting that had gone on to support the mines and all the expansion, human population expansion.
You described back then they were considered palatable.
They're very palatable in those days. Yeah, they were next to bighorn sheep. They were the most highly sought food source of the wild animals that we had. Anyway, these elk were brought in. The first load was brought in by actually headed up by a fellow named Dr. Looney from Prescott, and they went to Yellowstone, West Yellowstone, in the wintertime when the elk were concentrated. And caught 86 animals and loaded them on rail cars and moved them to Winslow. Only lost 3 in transit, and then loaded them on wagons and took them down to the present day, what's now today the present day Chevelon Ranger Station, and held them for 30 days in a corral and then turned them loose. And then after that there were subsequent releases up through, actually the last release occurred in '64 on the Wallapai Indian Reservation, but anyway, up through 1928. Williams was the last release, and that occurred, I think there were 54 animals that were released in 28 right north of the town of Williams. And anyway, that produced the animals that we have today here in Arizona.
Tuesday on my way home from work, I saw a couple cars pulled off on the side of 89A, top of Oak Creek Canyon, and there was one guy walking across the highway, and he had no idea there was traffic coming, but I was like, what are you doing on the highway? And sure enough, just off the side of the road, I mean, you could hit them with rocks, there was a bull and about 5 cows just on the side of the road about 2:30 in the afternoon, so that was really neat to see. It's always fun to see them. Let's jump into the Camp Verde area. Now, I've heard that there's a herd in Camp Verde, of elk in Camp Verde. I've never seen any of the elk down there. What brought for me, Camp Verde doesn't seem, or even the Verde Valley in general, doesn't seem like a really great area for an elk to be. I always picture them in the Ponderosa Pines, you know, the grassy areas. But there is a herd down in Camp Verde. What kind of brought that herd down, and when? Well,
first to comment on that,
okay.
Paul, elk have got this, I guess, a stigma of being a pristine wilderness type creature, which they do occur there. But elk are very, very urban, and they adapt very well to human habitation and coexist quite well with humans. I mean, in the sense of elk do what they want to do, which sometimes gets in the way of what humans are trying to do. But anyway, Camp Verde, the first elk that I was ever aware of in Camp Verde was in the late 80s, of, well, 88, 87, right in that time frame. And it was in the summer, of all places, and it was on the Camp Verde airport. But those animals, it seemed like in the mid-80s, began to extend their ranges off the rim down into Camp Verde, across the Verde River, into the area on Mingus Mountain. Pinto Mesa, which is right up above I-17 when you come out of Copper Canyon, was one spot that we first saw them there. And actually there were 2 killed illegally during a deer season in 1986 near Dugas.
Oh, wow.
So anyway, these animals, it seemed like there again in that 1980s was a period of expansion, range expansion, and they went into some habitats that prior to that we would have never ever considered elk to be, you know, capable of getting along in. But anyway, they did come into the Camp Verde area. They did become quite a nuisance in terms of the folks that were trying to grow agricultural crops in the late 90s. And consequently, there was Camp Verde was kind of declared one of these elk-free areas by the Arizona Game and Fish Department, and they set up special hunts to accommodate the reduction of those elk numbers. I know there's still some here, and there probably will be for a long, long time. But they're a very adaptable creature, and as long as they can get food, water, cover, and space, they're going to be here.
I'll be darned. Now, did Game and Fish at the time do a study as to try to figure out why they were moving down? Because it would seem to be a very hot location for them to live as well. It's such a big animal.
Yeah. No, there was really never any studies other than, again, there was a habitat here that was suitable for them at the time, and it obviously still is today, and they're going to be here. As I said, that stigma we have about them, we need to kind of put away, because they're very, very adaptable creatures and can live in a lot of different habitats if they've got, you know, again, those components that their habitats that they have to have in order to sustain life.
Do we know what their numbers are in the state?
I'm not familiar with the recent population estimates, but you know, there's again, the Game and Fish Department every year produces population estimates based upon what they call the base population, which is not the animals that are juveniles of the year. When I was working, it was in the neighborhood of 22, 23,000, yeah.
Is there a region of the state where they're more densely populated than other regions? Like, I guess the Verde Valley, obviously, we have not a very large population, although they have started to call it home. Is there a larger population?
One area in the state that comes to mind that's kind of been, I guess you might say, a mother lode for elk populations is Game Management Unit 6A, which runs all the way from Camp Verde, bounded roughly by Oak Creek and the Mormon Lake Road and Flagstaff. So there's a big center chunk there. I don't remember how many square miles it is, but it has some really high elk densities. It has, of course, both winter and summer range. Elk are found throughout the whole geographic area of that unit, but on the other hand, they tend to achieve their highest densities on, at least in the summertime, you know, in the upper elevations, Mormon Lake area and all.
All right, let's take our first break. Tom Britt with the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation in studio today. I'm Paul David. This is Countywide. We're going to take a quick 2-minute break. We'll be right back.